So I selected these questions straight from the quiz, and I just changed a couple of values to get you more prepared for it. Right here in the first couple of questions, which you should have copied down in your notebooks, including all these instructions right here. In numbers 1 and 2, I want you to find the value of r so that the line passes through each pair of points and has the given m. So these are like probably the most time-consuming, the most challenging questions on the whole quiz tomorrow. Number 1, I give you these two coordinates, and I also tell you that the slope is undefined. So let's start by labeling the coordinates. X, Y, X, Y. This is your first point. This is your second point. Everybody should do that. After that, you want to write your equation. Not your equation, your formula for slope. And there's your slope formula. And then after that, it's just a question of plugging things in. Okay, I give you a y2 value, which is 6. I give you a y1 value, which is 4. That belongs right there. The x2 is r. It's going to go right there where the x2 is at. The x1 is 2. It's going to go right there. And the slope, I tell you that the slope is undefined. So that means something very important. M is undefined means that you have a 0 underneath. That's something we have to memorize. If 0 is underneath, M is undefined. Right? Undy. If 0 is on top, if you're working the slope formula and you get 0 on top, then the answer is 0. But if 0 is underneath, your answer is undefined. So if they tell us that the slope is undefined, that must mean that the slope ends up being a fraction with a 0 on the bottom, and it doesn't even matter what number's on top. Any number divided by 0 is undefined. So we really have a number over 0 equaling the fraction, and let me plug in our values here. y2 is 6, y1 is 4, x2 is r, x1 is 2. Are you guys with me? Yeah? So at the end of it all, the only thing that really matters is that our denominator has to end up being 0. Does that make sense? So if r minus 2 has to be 0 in order for this thing to become undefined, what does r have to be? R has to be 2. Does that make sense? So that's it. The answer is r equals 2. I mean, there's no need to cross multiply. Well, first of all, we don't even know what number's up here really. I mean, sometimes they'll give us an actual fraction for the slope, maybe like 2/3. So if you have a 2 on top and a 3 on the bottom, yeah, you could cross multiply and set them equal to each other, and you could solve that way. But right here, all they tell us is that the slope is undefined, which means that it's a fraction with 0 underneath. It's undefined. So we know that the r value has to be 2 because 2 take away 2 will give us that denominator of 0. Another way of looking at this problem is to think of it visually, right? So let's think about this visually, guys. First of all, we're talking about a line that passes through the coordinate 2, 4. So if I draw xy plane and go to the coordinate 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I put a dot right here. Now the other one says a number and 6. So if I know that my slope is undefined, that means that it's perfectly up and down. It's so steep that you can't define it. So what must this value be? It must be 2. Because if the other one had 2, 4, then this one has to be 2, 6, 2, 6. If you did go to 2, 6, it would be up here, and that would give you the perfectly vertical line. Remember, an undefined slope is saying that it's so steep, it's perfectly vertical, up and down. Kind of like the 0 slope is so flat that it's just left and right, horizontal, right? That's the slope, m equals 0. This is undefined. Does that make sense? So you could think about it numerically, plugging in what you know, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That's what we did here. And we know that that'll give us the slope. And we know that the slope is undefined. So you could put a fraction, any number you want, over 0 because that will make it undefined. And then you just think, well, right here, r minus 2 has to be 0, so it must be 2. Or you could think of it visually on an xy plane the way we did. That will be on the quiz tomorrow. And it'll probably be on the test next Friday. Okay? So please understand that. Number 2, same thing. but in this case, we actually have m equals 1/2. So let's work this out. Again, let's write down our slope formula. And of course, after you write the formula, label your points, xy, xy, 1, 1, 2, 2. And now we're just going to plug in everything that they give us. So y2 is going to go right here. The 5 is going to go right there. The y1, which is r, is going to go right there. The 6, which is x2, is going to go down here. And the -2, which is x1, is going to go right here. And what about the slope, 1/2? We're going to take that 1/2 value and put it right into the m position. So I'm going to write my new equation. Instead of m, I'm going to write 1/2 because they give us that the slope is 1/2. And we're going to plug in the y2 values, the y1 values, and all that other stuff. So I always, when I plug in, put the division and the subtractions first. And now let's plug in our y2 value, which is 5, our y1 value, which is r, our x2 value, which is 6, and our x1 value, which is -2. And now we have an equation that we could actually solve. Okay? Is there anything we could do to make this look a little nicer? Plus, plus. And we could actually add the 6 plus 2. Right? So let me rewrite my equation. It's 1/2 equals 5 minus r over 8. And now we could get rid of fractions by multiplying by the denominator, but I'm going to cross multiply because I have one fraction equal to another fraction, and that's a proportion right there. So all you have to do is remember to put parentheses around the binomial 5 minus r. So let's distribute. 1 times 8 equals 2 times 5 minus r. And that's why we need parentheses to help us remember to distribute. So let me distribute. 2 times 5 is 10. 2 times -r is -2r. It equals 8 because 1 times 8 is 8. And now let's get r by itself on the right side of the equal sign. So I'm going to subtract 10. Subtract 10. My new equation will be -2 equals -2r, which means that when I do my final step of dividing by -2, I have r equals 1. R equals 1. So those are the hardest type of questions that will be on tomorrow's quiz, where I give you the slope and I give you some coordinates, but with the missing value r. This next part, there's going to be a couple of these questions. These are like the easiest type of questions. Find the slope. Now, I heard some of you tell me, well, you only gave me 1 point, right? How many points are in this line?
2.
There's an infinite amount of points, right? I mean, with these arrows, it's represented. It goes on forever, right? So you need to find another coordinate, which is nice. Like this one would not be nice because that would be the coordinate 0 and who knows, a fraction, right? I mean, a fraction and 0. But here's a nice coordinate. It crosses right through the coordinate 0, -1. So go ahead and put your dot right here. And then how much do you rise and how much do you run?
1.
You rise 2, you run 1. So again, slope is rise over run. So the answer is up 2 plus 2 over 1. That's your answer, 2 over 1. Now, in the multiple choice, they might just say m equals 2, and that's it. Okay? But 2 over 1 is also an acceptable answer, especially if we're talking about rise over run. Let's move on to this next one. So there's going to be a couple of those that are super easy. There's going to be a couple of these, maybe 3 or 4 of them, where you actually have to calculate slope. They're not as difficult as the first 2 that we did. These are pretty easy right here. All you got to do is know the slope formula. And also label your points, xy, xy, 1, 1, 2, 2. And then all you got to do is plug them in. So there's my division, subtraction. That's what you should always do when you plug in and use the slope formula. So y2 is -9, y1 is -4, x2 is -8, and x1 is -2. And again, the minus minus changes to plus plus. And now we have -9 plus 4, that is -5. And on the bottom, -8 plus 2 is -6. Now that's our answer. However, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So at the very least, we could change these guys to positive. So m equals a positive fraction 5/6. Rise 5, run 6. So there's going to be several of those on the quiz. And there's going to be a couple of these, actually about 4 of these or 5 of these on the quiz. And again, the instructions are kind of long right here. It says determine if the following equations are linear. If they are, rewrite them in standard form and find the x and y intercepts. So that's a lot of instruction, all right? So the first thing you need to do is determine if they're linear. So how do we know when they're linear? This was on the final, actually we did this just I think on Monday or Tuesday. Yeah, Monday. We wrote down these notes in class. It says an equation is not linear if it has 2 variables being multiplied together, if it has a variable in the denominator of a fraction, if a variable has an exponent on it. If you have any of those situations, then the equation will not produce a line. It'll produce something else, some type of curve. Okay? And we actually did these examples in class on Monday. So was this one linear? Yes. It does not have x times y. It doesn't have x squared or y squared or x to the third or any power on the variables. It doesn't have a variable in the denominator, so this is definitely a line. Is this a line? No. Why not? Because x times y. Is this a line? No, because x squared, right? So we have to remember these details. An equation is not linear. An equation is not linear if it has 2 variables being multiplied together, if it has a variable in the denominator, or if it has a variable with an exponent on it, then it's not linear. So now I think we'll be able to understand these guys better. What do you guys think? Is number 5 linear? Yes, it does not have x times y. It does not have a variable in the denominator. It doesn't say 2 divided by x, right? What else? It doesn't have an exponent on any variable. It doesn't say x to the second or y to the third. So according to us, according to our notes, this is a line. Now, the instructions say if it is a line, if they are, then rewrite it in standard form and find x and y intercepts. So this is a lot of work. If you didn't leave enough space, you're not going to be able to do it. So we said it was linear, so we need to rewrite it in standard form. And standard form is capital AX plus capital BY equals capital C. And the reason why they're capitalized is to help you remember what? You don't want what? No fractions. No fractions. So I need to get rid of these fractions. What could I do? I could get rid of one of the fractions at a time, or I could multiply everything by the LCD to get rid of both at the same time. I think we've done LCD several times. Do you guys want to get rid of one of them at a time? Yeah, just to see the difference? Let's get rid of one of them at a time. Let's say you wanted to get rid of the x divided by 2. Go ahead and multiply by 2, multiply by 2, multiply by 2. That'll cancel out. You're going to have x minus 2 over 3 with the y. Why is it 2 over 3? Because the 2 did not cancel with the 3. So I need to leave it 2 over 3 with the y. There's a y. And over here equals 2. Equals 2. And then I'd have to multiply everything by 3 to get rid of this fraction. So let me do that. Let me multiply everything by 3. This times 3, this times 3, this times 3. So I'm going to have the final standard form equation, 3x minus 2y equals 6. That's my standard form equation. So it was linear. I changed it to standard form. And then on top of that, I need to find my x and my y intercepts. So I hope you guys remember this part. X intercept, y intercept. Squiggly line between them. So how do I find my x-intercept? I'm going to have to set y equal to 0. So let me show you. You're going to have the equation 3x minus 2 times 0, setting y equal to 0, equals 6. So the 2 times 0 just disappears because it's 0. So I really have 3x equals 6, which means that x equals what? X equals 2. Now that is the x-intercept, okay? So I think on the multiple choice, they don't write it as a coordinate. They don't write it, I mean, they should have written it like this, 2, 0. But I think on the multiple choice, they just wrote it like this, x 2. I think they just wrote it like that. That x-intercept is 2, and they represent it with the x and then the colon and then 2. I don't know why. They should have written it as a coordinate, but they didn't. How about for the y-intercept? How do I do the y-intercept? So for the y-intercept, we set x equal to 0. And let me rewrite my equation. Instead of 3x, we're going to put 3 times 0 minus 2y equals 6. Now, of course, 3 times 0 disappears. You have the simple equation, negative 2y equals 6. You divide by negative 2, divide by negative 2. You're going to have y equals negative 3. And that's your y-intercept value. Now, on the multiple choice, they're going to write it like this, y colon negative 3. So be prepared for that. So yeah, there's a lot of work on these guys. They first ask you if it's linear, you say yes or no. This one was yes. If it is, then you change it to standard form. And then once you change it to standard form, then you go for the x and the y-intercepts. How about number 6? Is that linear? Why not? Yeah, multiplying x and y. So you're just going to say no, or not linear. Not linear. And that's it. You can't really find the x and the y. I mean, you could, but we don't have to find the x and the y-intercepts because it's not a line. Moving on to this guy over here. Is this one linear? Why not? Correct. The y has a square on it, so it can't be linear. That produces some type of curve. Number 8. Is that linear? Yes, it is. It does not have x times y. It doesn't have x squared or y squared. It does not have an x in the denominator or a y in the denominator. So this is linear. We need to rewrite it in standard form. On this one, let's get rid of all fractions at the same time by identifying the LCD. What is the LCD here? If you think about the denominator 2, 3, and 4. 12. Not 6. I mean, yeah, 2 could change to 6, 3 could change to 6, but 4 can't change to 6. So you got to think one number that all of them could change to, and that's right, Paul, it's 12. So what I'm going to do is multiply everything by 12. Check it out. This times 12, this times 12, this times 12. And with a 12 on top and a 2 on the bottom, 12 divided by 2 is 6. And the reason why I wrote 6 is because when you have a 6 left over up on top, 6 times 1 is the 6 that I wrote down there. And then on the next one, 12 divided by 3 is what? 4. Now you really do have the 4 on top times the 2. And there's a negative in front of it, so it's going to be negative 8. And let's not forget about the y that's right there. Again, the negative is right here. The 4 times 2 is 8, and the y is with the 8. Last but not least, 12 divided by 4 is 3. And if we think about this, 3 times 3 with an x, what's 3 times 3 with an x? 9x. So we put 9x with an equal sign right there. Is this in standard form now? No. What do I need to do next? Move what? You want to move the 6? Okay, let's subtract 6. Subtract 6. I'm going to rewrite it. It's going to say negative 8y equals 9x minus 6. Is it in standard form now? Still need to move, right? Let's move the 9x over to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 9x. 9x take away 9x is 0. Take away 9x over here. You can't really subtract those, so you're just going to rewrite it. So let's rewrite it. It's going to be negative 9x minus 8y equals negative 6. And I've already seen the test. I've already seen the quiz. On the multiple choice, they're not going to leave it with the a value being negative. So what's my final answer going to be on the multiple choice? Positive 9x, positive 8y equals positive 6. They multiply everything by negative 1. They change all the signs. And we're still not done because we've changed it to standard form. We still need to find the x and the y-intercepts. So at this point, I still need to do a x int, y int, squiggly line. How do I find my x-intercept? I set y equal to 0, and I solve. How do I find my y-intercept? I set x equal to 0, and I solve. Wow, this one's ugly, but who cares? Let's do it. So if I set y equal to 0, my equation is going to read 9x plus 8 times 0 equals 6. 8 times 0 disappears. So I really have the equation 9x equals 6. Final step would be to divide by 9, divide by 9. So I really have x equals 6/9, which could reduce to, if you reduce by 3, it becomes 2/3. So the x-intercept is 2/3. Now for the other one, we're going to rewrite our equation, 9x plus 8y equals 6. But instead of 9x, I want to put 9 times 0. So 9 times 0 plus 8y equals 6. So 9 times 0 is nothing. So I really have the equation 8y equals 6. Let's divide by 8. Divide by 8. Your y-intercept will be, if you reduce by 3, it'll be 2. If you reduce by 2, it'll be 3/4. So final answer is 3/4. So the y-intercept will be at 3/4. I hope you guys understand that. Let's go to the last type of question on tomorrow's quiz. Find the x and the y-intercepts. And I give you 2 different lines. They're only going to give you 1 line at a time. I just wanted to do 2 problems in one right here. So how about for the black line? What's the x-intercept? Where does it cross the x-axis? At 3. How about the y-intercept? 2. It's like 3 points, right? How about the red line? What's the x-intercept? The red line, what's the x-intercept? X-intercept is 1. Y-intercept is -2. So you're supposed to write these in coordinate format, but like I said, the multiple choice doesn't even write it in a coordinate. They just write the answer. So the x-intercept for the black one was 3. The y-intercept for the black one was 2. The x-intercept for the red one was 1. The y-intercept was -2. And that's it. That's all you need to know for tomorrow's quiz. You should be able to ace it if you understand all these questions. In addition to all this, I would practice all your homework that you've had this week, because the questions are coming straight from there.